Yes, Shama, you can take over now. You can start.
Yes, thank you, Tahir. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. And today is our second lecture of the series on environmental law. I'm Shuma Talukdar from Friends for Future. Welcome you all. And we have Dr. Tahir Ali with us. He's the founder of the organization. Today, our speaker is from Brazil. Let me just take her. Valéria Emília 𝐂𝐥𝐿𝐴quino. She is a Brazilian lawyer and a research scholar at the Federal University of Goiás. She is also a member of the study group Law, Globalization and Citizenship. She is a member of the editorial board and research collaborator of International Law Without Border, Brazil, and a research associate member of Institute of International Studies, Bolivia. She was visiting fellow at the Mercosur Institute of Public Policies on Human Rights, Argentina, and a former professor in law at Presidencia Antonio Carlos University in Uberlândia, where she taught environmental law, civil practice, and civil procedure. Welcome, Valéria, and thank you so much for accepting our request. It will be a pleasure listening to you. Thank you. And just a small announcement for all the participants. You can keep on posting your questions in the chat box. We'll take it up at the end of the session. Thank you. Valéria, can you unmute yourself?
I tried, but he had to allow me.
Yes,
so
it's working.
Thank you very much, Shuma. Thank you very much, Dr. Tahir. I'm really happy to be here with you today. It's an honor, as I was mentioning with Dr. Tahir before this meeting start. I'm really happy when someone asks me about Brazilian context or even the context in South America, because I was talking to him and explaining that the situation that Brazil is living under the past few years in this government, sadly, it's a bit of chaotic, but there's still hope. There's still hope. We have, I'm going to explain to you today why there's still hope. We have some leading cases. We have some good environmental legislation. Surely we could improve, but we are getting there. And being able to share about Brazilian legislation and share about our cases is surely a way to internationalize about the environmental law here in Brazil. So I'm really happy to share with all of you. So if I may, I will start sharing my screen with you. Just 1 second. And let me see if I can do this right. All right. So I hope you can see the presentation. Can you?
Not yet, but I think something is coming. Yeah.
Now?
Yeah, it's good.
All right, perfect. So when Shuma first invited me, and again, thank you for the invitation, I was really thinking about the subject, because here in Brazil, we don't really have environmental courts. We don't really discuss this subject yet about climate change. It's something really new for Brazilians. But we have some cases, we have some law, so there's a way for us to discuss this subject. So this presentation today is entitled The Role of Brazilian Courts on Climate Change, and Uma has already introduced me, so I'm gonna skip to the next PowerPoint slide. So to start, I think the basis of Brazilian law and in Brazilian environmental law, the basis is our constitution. So our constitution was the current one is from 1988, so it's a bit old, and it's time for us to think of a new constitution where we can improve the environmental protection, and we can add more principles of environmental law. So as you can see, our constitution was after the Stockholm conference, but before the Rio conference. So we really didn't have enough environmental awareness by that time. We do have just one article, which is the article 225. And this article is as I mentioned, is the basis for us. So understanding Brazilian law on environmental protection is basically starting from our constitution. So this article is really important because it's part of what I call the Latin American constitutionalism here in our region. So if you look not only Brazilian constitution, but if you look other constitutions such as in Argentina, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, and Chile, if I'm not mistaken, most of these countries, the South American countries, they have added in their constitution this right, the environmental protection. But Brazil sadly only has one article. And in this article, I said it's important because our starting point is the right to an ecologically balanced environment, or a safe and healthy environment, as we say. And we consider this right as a human right. So it's considered in our constitution, even though we have the Article 5 in our constitution is the main article for fundamental rights and human rights. The Article 225 is also part of it. So it's considered a fundamental right for us. So as it says here, which is an asset of common use and essential to a health quality of life, which is basically an anthropocentric point of view. We haven't reached yet the ecological approach, but we are going there. And both government and community shall have the duty to defend and preserve it for present and future generations. So here, there are two other points that it's important for us. First, it's a duty that not only the state or the government itself have, but but also the community. So every Brazilian, every citizen, and not only the citizens, but also every person in Brazilian territory has this duty to defend and preserve, which means basically if you don't defend and preserve, if you violate this rule, you'll be violating a human right, you'll be violating a fundamental right, and surely you might be persecuted by criminal for environmental crimes as well. So, and when we say the present and the future generations, we are surely referring to intergenerational principle. So, and we are also mentioning, I mean, it's not really mentioning, but we can refer to it, we can relate to it, the environmental justice as well, since we are concerned about future generations as well. And we have 7 paragraphs in this article. I'm not gonna discuss all, mainly the most important one is paragraph 1, which we have a set of rules here. So to preserve and restore, preserve diversity and integrity, to also, let me change the next one, to control production, which is a very important one, because since we're going to discuss climate change from 2020, as I mentioned, it's something new here in Brazil, we're going to also rethink the production techniques, methods, everything that poses a threat to not only to climate change, but the environment itself. So this is important because this point here will be discussed in some cases, which I'll be mentioning soon. And there's one more, which is really important and has been improved in the past few years, which is the promotion of environmental education in all school levels and public awareness of need to preserve the environment. So basically, if you not only the elementary school, but also high school and also universities, there's this concern to teach people about environmental education and to raise awareness. So basically, nowadays we are discussing more the climate change, we're discussing more global warming, we're discussing more all those questions. So this is a really good point, because in the past it wasn't something that we used to discuss. So as I mentioned, the Stockholm Conference in 1972 was a framework for us. So we kind of try to incorporate this in our legislation, in our law. So there's the point to protect fauna and flora as well. And well, if I'm talking too fast or changing the slides, please tell me. But I will change them. So then I mentioned two other paragraphs here. The paragraph 2, which discusses the mineral exploitation, and paragraph 3 about this is one thing that I really would like to discuss, because it says procedures and activities considered as harmful to the environment shall subject the offenders, be they individuals or legal entities, to penal and administrative sanctions without prejudice to the obligation to repair the damage caused. So this is something really important, because when we discuss liability, when we discuss responsibility over related to environmental damage in Brazil, we discuss it not only in the civil field, but also the criminal and administrative. So if you ever commit a crime, an environmental crime here in Brazil, you can be prosecuted in these three instances, in these three fields. But it doesn't mean always that you're going to be prosecuted in these three fields, because sometimes you can commit an environmental crime under Brazilian law, and not always you will have the damage. So you not always will have the civil field to be prosecuted at. And the other 4 paragraphs, mainly they discuss about protected areas, nuclear power plants. In Brazil, we do have 2, and there's a third being constructed, but they are not sure yet, because we are still discussing. After the nuclear power plant disaster in Fukushima in Japan in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, we started to debate more about the need of power plants in Brazil, because mainly our rivers, they are the kind of river that allows you to construct dams. And basically the majority of our electricity system is based on hydroelectric power plants. So and sadly, from 2019 or 18, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 19, we had this 7th paragraph. And this one is what concerns me the most, because as I mentioned, this paragraph considers sporting with animals as a form of cultural manifestation, and such as rodeos or bullfights and stuff like that. And personally, I think this is something really difficult, because when they inserted, as so saying, this paragraph in our constitution, there was a lot of debate over it, because there are 2 principles here colliding, but they decided that cultural manifestation in this case is more important than animal health, than animal protection or well-being. As I mentioned, I don't really agree with this paragraph. I think we should have more of an advanced law on environmental and animal protection, animal well-being. But sadly, it is what it is. After our government changed in 2018, so since Bolsonaro won the election, we are sort of going downhill. So in this case, environmental, not only environmental protection, but also animal protection is being impaired. lately. And as I also point here, environmental protection is also recognized as a general principle of economic activity. So here, this kind of principle, considering environmental protection as a principle of economic activity within a Brazilian context, I would say there are pros and cons. First, the main pro is that companies, they really need to how do I say, to have environmental policies. So they really have to care about environmental protection. They no longer can do their activities not thinking of the environment. But sadly, the con, I would say that considering as a principle of general principle of economic activity, means basically that environment is still seen as a good, for this utilitarian value, not for its intrinsic value. So this is something that we should think of and try to change in the future, to consider the environment as for its intrinsic value. Basically, so as I was saying, when we think of environmental litigation here in Brazil, and when I say environment, I also refer to climate litigation, we have to see who can file petition to protect environment, or who can file a petition to discuss climate change in Brazil. And basically, again, I'm gonna talk about the Constitution. So first, as I have discussed with you about Article 5, which is our main article for fundamental rights and human rights, we have, I don't know how you call this in English, but here we call inciso, which is this Roman number, which is number 73. So basically, we say that any citizen has standing to file a popular action or actio popularis to annul an act injurious to the public property or to the property of an entity in which the state participates, to administrative morality, to the environment, to the historic and cultural heritage, and then so on. So this point here in this article, it's kind of contradictory, because as I said, this article entitles the fundamental rights and human rights not only to Brazilian, to our citizens, but everyone who comes to our country. So it doesn't matter if you're foreign or not. So even if you're a tourist or if you're living here, you can have access to the right, to this set of rights in the Article 5. So basically, if you need to have access to public health care here in Brazil, or if you need education, you can have access. You can have access also to a writ, which we call here habeas corpus, because our basis in Brazil is civil law, and we use a lot of expressions in Latin. Everyone can have access, but this point here says that only Brazilian citizens, only citizens here in Brazil, they can file a popular action. But some jurists here in Brazil, they have agreed that not only citizens, Brazilian citizens, so saying, can file. Since the environment is a public good, there is the public interest over it, we understand, and when I say jurist, I also include myself, we understand that every person here in Brazil could file an actio popularis, or in Portuguese, ação popular, to protect the environment, because we consider that environment, especially when we are thinking of environmental protection, we are thinking not only about the present but also the future generations, and we are also thinking that this can affect other countries, for example, that share borders with Brazil, and so on. So we have this duty. So for example, I would say if an Argentinian comes to Brazil, which we have borders with Argentina, we share borders. So if they come to Brazil and they feel like Brazilian government is breaching the law, is violating this right to a healthy environment and ecologically balanced environment, this person could file a petition, of course, under Brazilian law. So there's another article in our constitution, which is Article 129. And this article basically discusses the functions of our public prosecutor's office, or also called here in Brazil Public Ministry or Ministério Público. And among their tasks, their duties, there's this one to institute civil investigation and public civil suit, which I'm going to discuss in a few minutes, to protect public and social property, the environment, and other diffuse and collective interests. So basically, the prosecutor's office can also file a petition to protect the environment. So we usually say that they are guardians of diffuse and collective interests and rights. And the third point is that we have this law, the Public Civil Suit Act. I'm sorry, I forgot to include the number, but I decided to share with you who else can file a petition to protect the environment. So not only the public prosecutor's office, but public attorneys or defendant office, which we call Defensoria Pública, union, states, federal district, and where our capital is Brasilia. So the federal district is Distrito Federal for us, and cities, they can present also a public civil suit act suit to protect environment. And also we have autarchies, public companies, foundation or mixed economy societies, and associations. But the point is that associations, they have to be constituted at the time they want to file the petition for at least 1 year under the terms of our Brazilian civil law, and include among its institutional purpose the protection of public and social heritage, the environment, and also the artistic, aesthetic, historical, tourist, and landscape heritage. So let me pass. I have here some data for us to discuss the CO2 emissions in Brazil. I'm not going to discuss the technical terms of it, but I just want to show you that over the years, the CO2 emission in Brazil has been rising. But after the Paris Agreement, Brazil has agreed to reduce these emissions. So we are trying to reach this, but as we have a government here in Brazil nowadays that doesn't have the environment as a priority, we are still struggling to achieve the SDG goals, as so saying. And but we are trying over the years to reduce. So I also brought here our annual share of global CO2 emissions. So Brazil is basically representing like almost 1.4 of all total CO2 emissions, and we only have data until 2017. And if we look nowadays, since, as I mentioned, since 2018, we are going to see that maybe this number will slightly increase because our current government doesn't really care about environmental protection, and I'm going to discuss this in a few seconds. And then for you to understand the emissions by sector here in Brazil. So our CO2 emissions, they are particularly high in the agriculture field, and also land use change in forestry and transport. And agriculture here in Brazil is, as we all know, it's one of our it's the basis of our economy. So it makes sense that it has higher greenhouse gas emissions rates. And let me change. So now I'm going to really discuss I'm really going to discuss the point of the climate litigation here in Brazil. So just to remind that Brazil has ratified the Paris Agreement in September of 2016. But sadly, we had not ratified this 𝐂𝐤 agreement, which is a very important agreement for us in the context of CEPAL organization, so in the context of Caribbean and Latin America. And this agreement specifically discusses the access to information, public participation, and justice in environmental matters. And it's important because it mainly it allows and improves the public participation on environmental matters. So which means that it could be an easy way and less bureaucratic to allow people to decide to participate in this kind of decisions that concerns environmental matters. And we also have this law here, number 1287 from 2009, which establishes the national policy on climate change. But sadly, it has not been updated. We tried to discuss this last year and also this year, but they have archived the files, and they won't update, I think, at least not in a close future. So we could update this law, including the terms of Paris Agreement, but instead we only have this the Kyoto Protocol and other agreements and treaties that were discussed later, but before the Paris Agreement, so until 2009. So it's something that we should discuss in the future, as I mentioned, but I don't think we're going to discuss in this government. So maybe after 2022 we might. And just let me share once more. So about the cases. Oh, there's one question here. Should I just, oh, sorry, I just read here. So if you have the questions, I will be happy to answer them as soon as I finish. So the leading cases at Brazilian Supreme Federal Tribunal. We have two Supreme Courts here. In fact, the Supreme Federal Tribunal is our highest court, but we do have one called Superior Tribunal de Justiça. And the difference between them is that we consider the Supreme Federal Tribunal as the guardian of our Constitution. So basically, when we have human rights violations, fundamental rights violations, so saying we're going to discuss these cases at this court here. We don't have any environmental court as there are in Australia, and if I'm not mistaken, also in New Zealand, but here we don't. We usually discuss these matters in regular courts, or if it's a constitutional matter, we discuss this at, as we call here, STF, or Supremo Tribunal Federal. So we have these three cases here, and they are all new. They are all from last year. So they were all the petitions were filed, and the cases started last year. So we have the Amazon Fund case, we have the Climate Fund case, and the PPCDM case, which is Plan for Prevention and Control of Deforestation in the Amazon. As you all might have seen over the past few years, we had seen many fires here in Brazil, and sadly criminal fires, not natural fires as expected in dry season, but we had seen many fires here in Brazil. And due to 2 points, actually I would say 3 points. The first one is that there's an agriculture belt near the Amazon. So there's the state of Amazonas, and below this state we have the state of Mato Grosso. And basically the belt goes up to the borders of between those states. And these criminal fires, they are trying to destroy the Amazon, which is a soil really rich, and it would be good for agriculture. So they destroy, they set fire to gain more space, to have more space to plant. And this is really sad because the government is not really controlling it. In fact, since 2018, our environmental protection body has the funds cut. I can't remember if it was cut by half, or I can't remember the amount, but year by year they are cutting funds for this body to control and prevent this kind of thing in Amazon region. And another point is that mining is also growing in the region. And we also have another sector growing, which is the lumber sector. And as a direct consequence, we not only we have the micro climate change. I'm saying micro because it's changing like regionally, but we also have as a consequence many indigenous communities here in Brazil. They are kind of being forced to flee to other regions and states because they no longer can stay in this living in the forested region in the Amazon. So they are losing their space. They are sort of losing their culture as well because they are being threatened, and then they are being forced to move to other states and regions. And this all these three cases here, we call it ADPF, so say here in Brazil, which basically is the allegation of non-compliance with a fundamental precept. So when you have a fundamental precept, a fundamental right violated, we have this kind of petition to be filed in this court, presented by associations or foundations in this case. So all these three cases, they were either presented by associations or foundations. And then it's not changing. One second. Oh, sorry. Yeah. All right. So then the public hearings that happened in 2020. So as I said, the cases, they are still ongoing. Sorry, I missed one L there. I tried to proofread, but we always skip one thing. So first, the climate fund case. This case seeks to discuss the direct effect of a right to a healthy and ecologically balanced environment in the Constitution, and to compel the executive power to guarantee the regular functioning of climate fund. Um, Under that law, I mentioned that framework for us, we are supposed to have a climate fund. But I feel like over the years, the government has prioritized other areas. And we kind of started discussing the climate change here in Brazil after the Paris Agreement. And also, I would say with the Sustainable Development Goals. So this case here is trying to make the government to spend more funds in this climate fund, to put more funds there to really enhance the protection here in Brazil concerning the climate change. So, and also I would say the environmental protection. The second case, the Amazon Fund case, debate with markedly technical character on policies for monitoring, controlling deforestation, studies on tracking production chains in terms of their environmental and climate footprint. So this one here is not only discussing within the Amazon region, but it is more technical. So the hearings that happened last year, they had not only lawyers for sure, but they had basically engineers, they had biologists, they had many professionals, specialists from several fields to discuss how we should monitor and control the deforestation here in Brazil, because obviously we are not doing great in this point. Otherwise, there would be more protection, but we are missing. So how can we monitor, and what policies can be implemented in this case, and using the Amazon Fund to pay for all this monitoring and controlling? And the last case is really questioning the environmental policy by our current government. So there was a 34% decrease in environmental fines. So if you commit a environmental crime in Brazil, you not only, as I mentioned, will be will be sued in the criminal field, but also administrative. So they can fine you. And there are two main bodies here in Brazil that can issue these fines, which is IBAMA and 𝐂𝐸𝐴𝐵. And the government has cut funds for both bodies. So since there's no enough people to monitor and there's not enough funds to pay for this kind of control and monitoring, the fines has also decreased. And they are trying to make this environmental crime, they are trying to implement this environmental amnesty for environmental crimes. So when Bolsonaro won the election, he said this would be one of his priorities, to let the agricultural field to grow and to make this less bureaucratic, and to allow not only miners and people in the lumber field, but also basically farmers to do whatever they want. So this is really sad and really serious. And they are asking the government to reduce deforestation to the rate stipulated in the National Policy on Climate Change. So this, for me, this is the main case when we compare these three cases. The PPCD-AM case really starts to discuss the climate change. It really starts to discuss the impact of Bolsonaro government over the climate change in a, not only here in Brazil, but in a regional context, because we all know the importance of Amazon to the world. So that's why we are questioning his policies. And before I start to discuss, I know I'm almost running out of time, but I would like to just to point some specific SDGs here in Brazil. We are trying to increase resilience. We are trying to integrate the national policy, as I mentioned, to improve education and to stimulate the expansion of international cooperation. We are slowly getting there, day by day. We are trying, but when you have a government that doesn't have the environment as a priority, it will be difficult to fulfill this SDG. So I just brought here this so you could see the SDG number 13. It says that we are on track or maintaining the SDG achievement. Basically, I would say that we are maintaining but slightly decreasing. So let me change. And here, some questions for us to think for future debates and for you to think. Because here, as I mentioned, the climate litigation is something new. And some jurists, they discuss that the climate litigation is a concern to the principle of legal certainty. And there's another point that here in Brazil, not the criminal environmental crimes itself, but the environmental damage reparation, we consider as imprescriptible. So our current government is trying, when I say government, I mean all the powers, not only the executive, but they are trying to change the law to turn what is imprescriptible into 5 years prescription. So we are discussing this. To be honest, I think we should discuss more climate litigation, but I understand their concern over legal certainty, because it's difficult to discuss climate change in damage compensation, for example, if you don't really have enough data on Brazil, for example, because since the government has cut funds, it's difficult to have accurate and enough data. So that's why the importance of NGOs, the civil society, to help us to get this data, to do studies, researches, analysis, and to help us in order for us to have a really climate litigation here in Brazil. Besides, there's the point of environmental justice. We are really thinking of the future generations, but I think nowadays here in Brazil, they are more concerned about how the present generations being affected. We do care about the future generations, but the government itself is only thinking of the present. That's why the economy is more important for than the environment for this government. And one last point is that we have been discussing about ecocide. Can Bolsonaro be tried on ecocide over at the International Criminal Court? As we all know, ecocide is not really a crime under the Rome Statute, but people are discussing if ecocide could be considered as a crime against humanity. So I don't know yet if he will be, but surely it's something that we need to discuss. We need to raise this debate, this question, and hopefully in the future we might have answers to all of these points here. And just one more thing about damage and compensation. When we discuss damage and compensation on environmental crimes and overall, it's difficult because when we try to measure an environmental damage, we are not thinking only of the present, but also the future generation. And most of the times it's difficult to know all the goods, all the resources, animals, or so saying, also the flora and fauna that were affected by an environmental damage. So we do have some cases here in Brazil, not only, I mean, we do have a lot of environmental cases in Brazil concerning damage, but we don't have any case concerning damage and climate change. But I think it's a pattern for the future for us to have cases such as this one in our justice. And to finish my presentation, I would like to thank you and to say that this point here in Brazil, as I mentioned when I started discussing with you, it's something that if you start talking to jurists about environmental law, they would say that, oh, why are we discussing environmental law if our government clearly doesn't respect the law, really doesn't respect our legislation and doesn't have any concern over environmental protection. But I would say that more and more we discuss, more and more awareness we raise, and more we have the future generations to think of environmental protection. So I won't give up. I will keep discussing about environmental law, and I'm really happy that you are also doing this from several countries in this world, because we shouldn't give up. We should just keep discussing and discussing until our governments finally realize that this matter, this environmental question, is a matter that threats not only our sovereignty over natural resources, which is not the main point here, but it threatens the survival of humanity, the survival of a state, the survival of people. So we should consider environmental protection as high politics, not as low politics as it has been considered over the years. So I think we are changing, we are getting there, and I think we should be ambitious. So my ambition here is that over the years we will have more climate litigation in Brazil, and we are going to change, and we are going to enhance and improve environmental protection in the country. So thank you again, and I'm free if you want to send me an email, if you want to write me in LinkedIn, or if you want to just ask here, I'll be happy to answer all the questions. So thank you very much again, and that's it.
Thank you so much, Valéria. Your lecture is not only interesting, it was also, I mean, it's so full of informations. So I can also see lots of similarities between Indian law and Brazilian law. And actually, I think this is this is very interesting part, that when we enter into dialogue with people from different country, so it becomes a comparative study. We can compare actually where we are lacking behind, so that you can improve ourselves, or we can work together. I think this is the best part of working together with the people from throughout the world. So there are a couple of questions in the chat box. If you can kindly pick up those questions.
Yes. Can I start answering one by one? Is it
Yes,
okay?
yes,
Or you
sure,
want me
yes.
to answer in blocks?
No, you can start one by one. That is
Okay.
fine.
Just one point. This is something, I don't know if it has ever happened in any of your lives, but while I was teaching environmental law, because I worked as an environmental law professor for 2 years in a local university, I mean, not always, but I have seen some students, they were questioning if global warming was true, if climate change was true, if it was a hoax or not. And sometimes when we are discussing environmental protection, it's difficult because mainly nowadays we are facing the era of fake news, and people don't really care about finding the source. People don't really care about checking if we really have that law or not, if that information is true or false. And I think just one point I forgot to mention. If we start improving more our education, not only in environmental matters, but overall education, general education, I think we can change this and expect to have a more educated generation that will believe in science, because the main point about climate change is also believe in science. And sadly, some people are still living, I think they are living out of this world. If they have not been ever heated by they have never lived like a flood or a dry season or really hot weather out of the normal, so they are living out of this world. And denying climate change is something really serious, and governments, if they want to really achieve the SDG number 13, they should really invest in education. So questions here. What is the public perception of environmental of late in Brazil? The public perception. All right, we have two sides here in Brazil. Since 2014, a little bit before the coup we had in 2016, our population was kind of between the right and the left, and there were some in the middle. And then after the coup, the right party has been growing and growing, but we don't really know what happened in 2018, because we clearly are living in the outright government, because Bolsonaro is clearly outright or far right, so saying, and he supported Trump for a while. So whenever Bolsonaro was supporting Trump, and Trump denied several times the climate change, and so this had a huge impact over our population, because many people believed in what Bolsonaro and Trump were saying. So sadly, this group here, the right group, they were basically denying, they were basically saying that there was an environmental degradation in Brazil, that fires, they weren't criminals. What else? This is the main public perception. But luckily, after the pandemic, they are slightly changing. They are becoming more aware of the situation, not only in terms of the pandemic, but the environmental itself. So it's slightly changing. And the left, and also the people in the middle, I would say that they believe, they see environmental degradation as a problem here in Brazil. But we are still conflicted, we are still divided, we have these both groups. And as I mentioned, when I was teaching, this was sort of an issue. I avoided discussing politics about Brazilian politics over several times, but sometimes I had to mention what the government was doing, and they were like, no, Bolsonaro is doing great, Bolsonaro is doing fine. which is clearly not. So I hope I have answered your question about the public perception. So we have like 50-50. I would say like more 60-40. We're changing. What is the basic idea and the main factors behind the gradual fall down in the climate conditions of Brazil? Um, the basic idea and the main factors behind the gradual. Well, this is something really difficult to answer because I think I would need more of technical details out of my main field, which is law and human rights. But the main idea is that here in Brazil, as I mentioned, our biggest concern is with the Amazon region. And this gradual fall down in the climatic conditions of Brazil is clearly related to what is happening in Amazon. In 2019, I think it was by the end of the year. So I don't know if you're familiar with Brazilian map, but Amazon is right in the north. So basically, the whole part of Amazon is in the north, and it takes the state of the main state is Amazonas, but we have also other states such as Pará, Amapá, Rondônia, Roraima, Mato Grosso, the one I mentioned. So we have all these states, and the agricultural belt in Mato Grosso is raising up to the north in the Amazon region, and it turns. I mean, in 2019 there was a huge fire there, and the air condition was really poor, and it was so serious that fires in the Amazon probably they just had to. I wouldn't say the pollution flew. I don't know the verb here, but the pollution from Amazon went to São Paulo state. And I would say, in terms of distance, this is more than 2,000 kilometers that this pollution flew to other states, not only São Paulo, but also Paraná, which is below São Paulo, and Santa Catarina. So the main idea is that the climate change here in Brazil, if you really want to be committed and fight its consequences and impacts, especially the social impacts, I would say that we have to start monitoring, tracking what is going on in that region. Not only we have to increase funds, which is the point of these cases I mentioned, but we do have to monitor and track what is going on there and have a more rigid legislation, because our environmental law overall is not rigid enough. We don't have really good sanctions to halt people to keep committing crimes, environmental crimes. So I hope I have answered your question. Let me see the other one. Man, with regard to the expertise that an environmental issue needs, how to enhance public participation with regard to environmental litigation apart from the awareness aspects. Oh, that's a good one. Thank you for the question. Well, I would say, apart from the awareness, which is the main point, to raise awareness and also to invest in education, I think we should have more environmental laws and update our national policy under the terms of Paris Agreement. Besides, there's something really important for us in the context of the Americas continent, the American region. In 2017, I think I'm not sure if you are familiar with our inter-American human rights system, but in 2017 we have an advisory opinion, we call it opinião consultiva, which is a consultative opinion, number 23, which was I think Colombia addressed this question to the court, to the Inter-American Court, and in this opinion, we consider this as a framework to the Latin American constitutionalism. Why we consider it as so? Because finally, the court has discussed about environmental responsibility over damage when damage happens, and not only considering sharing borders, but if it affects other countries. We have the court discussed that. The court discussed a bit about climate change, not much. It could have discussed more, but it wasn't the main point. And the main point is that finally the court has said there is a direct link between environmental protection and human rights fulfillment, enjoyment, so saying. So to enhance public participation, I would say is to tell people about their rights and how their rights will be affected if we don't protect the environment. Because clearly the court wanted to send this message, and if we do want to send this message to the public, is that their rights, everything they know, will be endangered, will be violated if we don't protect the environment. So I really like an Argentinian author, which is called Luis Ricardo Lorenzetti. He calls the environmental, he considers the environment as a meta value, and I would add here as a super right. So basically what this author wants to say is that all it's a really important value that should how do I say, should delineate all the other values in our legal system, and all the rights are linked to the environmental protection. It means that I can't really have dignity, even my right to life, to physical, to integrity, and so on, can be violated if I don't have a healthy and ecologically balanced environment. So I would say that awareness, yes, it's the basis of everything, but I would say that also with awareness, I would say that public participation and all the rights in the 𝐂𝐥𝐢 agreement that I mentioned, they are the key to enhance public participation. So I hope I have answered your question. And how can international community pressurize non-compliant national government to comply with ecological standards? I would say that the problem that we face under international environmental law is that debate over hard law and soft law. And as most multilateral environmental agreements, they are considered as soft law or as non-binding. It's really difficult to compel states to respect those norms, those rules in these agreements. But I would say that international community can pressurize in some terms. For example, boycott. So, for example, international community can invest in in green economies, in green trades, for example. So let's give this example here. Germany, we all know that it's been really concerned about environmental protection over the years. And Germany has threatened several times, and if I'm not mistaken, 2019, they didn't send a fund they were supposed to send to help the Amazon because of our government. So governments, they can exercise this pressure over other governments. This way, it doesn't need to be a conflict, doesn't need to be like a direct debate, but there are other ways. So it can be exercised not only, for example, by states, but other actors within international law. So civil society can exercise pressure over states. International organizations can do that as well. And for example, even us as citizens, we have this role, this commitment with the environment. So for example, in my case, when I buy cosmetics, I always search to see if they have like a green seal, and if they do not test in animals. So what I'm trying to say is that there are several ways that international community can pressurize these governments to comply with these ecological standards. One more question here. My question is, if the Brazilian government is not taken seriously in making environmental laws more stringent, especially in industrial bodies, can the Brazilian Supreme Federal Tribunal take environmental cases suo motu and give appropriate directions to the government to come with plans to protect and preserve the environment so that common people wouldn't be impacted, prone to disease caused by environmental pollution? That's also, I mean, all the questions are really good, but this is one really interesting. The point I would say about the Brazilian Supreme Federal Tribunal is that some people, they fear what we call ativismo judiciário, ativismo jurídico, which means that juridical activism, which is when we have not soft law, but soft rules. It turns out that the justice might end up deciding how to do the interpretation over some matters, and also we have the really stronger, really solid jurisprudence. So for Brazilian civil law system, it's not like in common law countries where jurisprudence is really strong, but here is strong, but law is stronger than jurisprudence. So basically, our courts, they can tell how to do the interpretation over a norm, but their decision can't be above the law. And I do think that I will say STF, so I hope you don't mind for shortening the name. I would say that STF has a responsibility over it. They are trying to help the way they can, but being in that position, it's mainly political. So we do have good ministers, because we call them ministers, the main judges in this court. We do have good ones, but we also have people that our government has put them to work there. So it's a bit conflicting, because some of them, they are trying to decide, they are trying to enhance and improve environmental protection in the country, but there are judges, there are ministers that are trying to halt this because of the current government. So basically, even in the justice, it's a political matter. And I'm not sure if I do have the answer for your question, but what I'm trying to say here is that yes, jurisprudence has this active role to can help the environmental protection, but in this case, really give appropriate directions and plans. I think it's not their duty to give plans, but instead, I would say that the legislative, as we call legislativo, has more this rule to build a plan on how to overcome it. Otherwise, since we have three different powers and we do not allow one power to intervene in the other, so otherwise the justice, the judiciary would be intervening in other spheres. I'm not sure if you understand what I meant here.
There's some cases like the judiciary can kind of not like suggest to bring new laws, or the like fortification of certain breaches or something like that. So legislature is superior, but the still judiciary can somehow suggest that do or bring some more laws so that they can cover these lacunas.
They can, perfect. They can act together, and they should act together as one. But people are concerned because whenever the judiciary tries something new, then the executive and also the legislative, they say, oh no, you are intervening in my power. So they are kind of tied, you know. Just an example, I think it was in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, they were deciding if they were to include the homophobia as a crime, and how they were discussing how to make it. And basically the Supreme Court, STF, decided that. And they were like, well, they are doing judiciary activism there, and you're not supposed to do, because we have the law, and then the legislative should discuss it, not you. But the point is that a case has been brought to the STF, so they have the competence to discuss it. Surely they cannot create law, but they can help. So I think they should act together, but I understand their position as well. And we do have more questions here. Does Brazil recognize environment as a basic need to life? Yes, in the article 200, 225. So we do recognize as a basic need to life and also to well-being. And does Brazil accord plants and animals as a legal identity who are equal rightful occupiers of the earth? No. We were trying, because we have a civil code, but in the civil code we still consider them as objects. We don't really consider them as sentient beings, or beings that deserve this kind of you are referring to. But we are changing. But in this government, this debate, we were doing great, but this debate is nowadays stuck. And I think this we will only achieve this protection on animals mainly. I don't know about plants, but mainly on animals. We will only achieve only in the future. We are not prepared yet for this debate, not in this government. And man, since the INDC in Paris climate deal is non-binding, nature and developed countries are not sort of showing interest in the exit of United States from Paris deal. In fact, United States came back and ratified the agreement this year, if I'm not mistaken, in February. How developing countries in general as BRICS, excellent point, because Brazil and India are also part of BRICS, in particular, can make a change of perception in the global scenario. Well, first of all, we have to understand that we have the BRICS bloc, so saying, because we have all developing countries, developing economies, and strong economies as well. So we have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And these countries, they are together because not only because of the economy, but because of interest, means so saying the political interest on it. And how they can change the scenario, the perception, the global scenario, that's a tough question. I'm not sure if I have the answer for that, but I think cooperation is the basis when we are discussing international environmental protection. Cooperation is the basis, not only in terms of economy, but also in terms of scientific cooperation and so on. And I think Brazil and India have a good relation. There's a good relation between these two countries, and they are trying to support each other in terms of this scientific matters. I think if we are looking by blocks, if we are looking by organizations, I think it's a way we have to when there's a how do I say this? When there's something to be deciding as a group, as a block, as an organization, it's easier than deciding alone. So it's easier discussing this environmental protection within the BRICS than doing an isolated policy, which Brazil has been doing a bit. So if we consider, for example, our reality here in South America, the Mercosur, we will see that Brazil has been following a different path. But what I meant here is that the exit of United States was serious, because Brazil also threatened to leave because Trump was like, oh, I left. And then Bolsonaro was like, oh, if Trump left, I'm going to leave the Paris Agreement as well. Because whatever he did, Bolsonaro wanted to do the same. And but then Biden won the election, and it had a massive impact over us. A direct effect is that Bolsonaro is no longer talking about leaving the agreement. So I would say that deciding in organizations is important, but it's also important to see what other strong economies are doing. So I don't know if I have the answer for your question, but this is basically what I think. And there's one last one. How are corporate business are responding to climate change in Brazil? And is Brazil meeting the Paris target? Okay, about the Paris target, yes and no. We are working on reduce CO2 emission, as I showed in the graphics, in the chart, but we can do much more. So saying that under the terms of Paris Agreement, we are trying to be committed to not reach the 1.5 degree of temperature. We are trying not to go over. We are trying to do our best to cut emissions and all the terms in the Paris Agreement. But, and this but is important, the point is that we could have more environmental laws here in Brazil. We could have better sanctions. So I don't think Brazil is trying to meet the Paris target, but it hasn't reached it yet. And how our corporate business are responding to climate change in Brazil? It depends. Most of business companies, they are trying to earn this. We joke here in Brazil saying green money. They want this green seal to show that they are committed, but some countries clearly are not. I think you all might have seen, or if not, then I'm going to tell you quickly. In 2016, and then again in 2009, no, sorry, in 2014, I guess, and then 2019, we had two major dam collapses here in my state. I live in the state of Minas Gerais. And one was Mariana Dam collapse, and the second was Brumadinho Dam collapse. And the company Vale do Rio Doce, which is a multinational, was committed to show that it wasn't their fault, that they took all the actions to not commit this environmental damage. And this was really serious because one of the rivers is almost dead. Years and years later, we are trying to recover the ecosystem nearby and also the river. But we all know that mining has really serious elements, toxic elements. And they were trying to show that, oh no, we are committed to environmental protection. This was something that we weren't expecting. But in fact, the investigation showed that they had problems with that, not only with the license, but the way they did the disposal of this toxic things from the mining, made the collapse dam. And how they are responding to climate change? They are investing in social and environmental projects. So it's really common here in Brazil for you to see companies investing in NGOs and civil society as a general to help environmental projects. But some of them, they take advantage of this and say that they are doing a great job, that they are protecting the environment, but they are not. And it's difficult to really monitor, to really measure, but this is how it's going nowadays in Brazil. And do you think that Brazilian government will ever be serious about environment in the future? Yes, I do think. I mean, I don't want to sound utopic or too naive, but I do believe. I do believe because first, Rio in 1902 was a framework. We had a really good declaration on principles of environmental law, which were incorporated, even though it was soft law, it was incorporated in many legislations. And also the International Court of Justice has decided over some of these principles. In some cases, there are 5 main cases at the ICJ: the 𝐂𝐥𝐢𝐦𝐚𝐳, the nuclear tests 1 and 2, the whaling, and the one about the pulp mills here in South America, and the last one was the leading case in terms of reparation was about the Nicaragua and Costa Rica, if I'm not mistaken, over a river they were sharing. So what I'm trying to say here is that, yes, I do think Brazil was a reference before, sadly, this government. We were doing great in terms of environmental protection. I mean, we were trying. As an emerging economy, we know we have our problems, and especially about extractivism and agriculture, which is our basic, the basis of our economy. But Brazil was making good laws, was making good public policies on environmental matters, and we were spending more funds to monitor the situation. But as I said, it was from 2016 on, all the things that happened, they went downhill because we had this change in our politics. And so what I'm saying is that I do believe if we had have a more progressive government, then it's more likely that we're going to invest more, not only environmental protections, but in human rights as a whole. And just one more thing is that I'm not sure if you are familiar with our context here in not only in Brazil, but also in South America. The indigenous question is a big concern to us. And the Labour Party government was investing on it, trying to demark lands for indigenous communities, trying to demark lands that were considered as environmental protected areas that people couldn't do exploitation and so on. So we were doing, we were trying, but then things stagnated. This government has hot everything, so we are trying, but we are not being able to go much further. But in the future, yes, I do believe, especially because we're still investing in education, and I think this generation has the potential to change our the environmental protection overall. And do you believe that countries must include the rights of plants and animals in their respective constitution? Well, that's an issue. That's an issue. If we think under the ecological approach, then yes, we have this answer. But it's difficult to really have countries that follow this ecological approach, especially in their constitution. So just an example, Ecuador and Bolivia, they have in their constitutions what they call rights of the nature. So when we say rights of the nature, we are discussing capacity as well. So basically, we are saying that rivers, mountains, animals, they have legal capacity to, how do I say, to not only to, I mean, not to plea because they can't, but someone will represent them. But basically, they are more protected. And this is something that concerns some jurists, because some jurists say this, I'm going to quote, all right, this is not Valéria saying, but it's something I think it's important sharing. They say that why are we supposed to conceive, to attribute legal capacity to mountains, rivers, this kind of legal protection to non-sentient beings if we hadn't guaranteed yet the minimum standard of human rights and protections to our population, to people? So if there are people starving, facing inequalities, poverty, why are we already thinking of it? So they say that we should go step by step. I do agree that we should go step by step, but it doesn't really should stop us to think this way. I think the debate, every debate is important. So the debate on ecological approach, which is something that I have been working over the years, it's really important. but we should be aware of the current problems, especially concerning the human rights. And just one more thing is that the ecological approach brings this concern that considering the nature for its value, for its intrinsic value, and all the other paradigms. I'm not sure if I'm saying the right word in English, but in Portuguese it's paradigma. All the other ones, the neoliberal one, even the environment between the ecological and the neoliberal, they still see the nature for its utilitarian value, so as a good, as something you should exploit. But the difference between the neoliberal and the environmental one is that the environmental one has this all concern and awareness over the exploitation and how we should use and the sustainability, and the neoliberal no, but they are changing as well, slightly changing after the Green New Deal in the United States. I think they can. I mean, it will take some time, but they can. So if I do believe, I'm not sure if I really have an answer. Like I mean, I do believe that plants and animals must have protection, but I don't believe in the Constitution. I mean, it's difficult because basically adding something like this in the Constitution would require, to be effective, would require a whole change in the in the system of a country, in the legal system, in the political system, in the economic system. So I think in the law, yes, but in the Constitution, I'm not sure if I do agree right now, because it would be like, as I mentioned, sorry, in Bolivia and Ecuador, they do have rights to the nature, but they don't really fulfill. So what is the point of having a rule if you don't really follow, especially if it's a constitutional rule? As we all know, the constitutional is like this. So it's complicated, but my answer, I think, for this case in the Constitution, if we are not ready to fulfill it yet, so no. If we are ready to fulfill, when we are ready, then yes. So I hope I have answered all your questions, and I'm happy to answer more if you have. And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Valéria, and thank you for being so generous with your time, taking up all the questions. Thank you to all our participants for putting so many questions and being so actively involved in the discussion. And I think with this, we have come to the end of the session. Dr. Ali, would you like to say something, or should we wind up?
I would just say thank you so much, Valéria. There was so many interesting things came up during the discussion, especially during this question answer session. But the one thing just I want to add, there was a program in Brazil which was called Bolsa Verde or something like that, like giving some kind of subsidies or money to the people who are like indigenous people or indigenous societies to protect that, how this program is going, because there has been some understanding between EU and the Brazil that they would implement such a thing. Is this really been going nicely, or it has been gone down with this government as well?
Well, to be honest, I would say that in this government, almost everything related to human rights has been going down. But we do have some really good public policies concerning the Bolsa Família and other kind of aids that the government provide to specific groups and specific economic levels as well. So we do have, they are trying to maintain, because they know if they cut, there'll be a massive rage in the country. So they're trying to maintain. So for example, during the pandemic, they created something called Auxílio Emergencial, which can be translated as an amount of money that the government gave to really poor families, individuals that were affected by the pandemic. And so what I want to say is that this this all public policies, they are still ongoing, but since they are alt-right and they do have this vision of minimum state, they were trying to cut, or if they do not cut, they are trying to rename it because they don't want anything related to what was created in the Labour Party government, because the Labour Party government it lasted from 2002 until 2014, if I'm not mistaken, 14 years of Labour Party government in charge, and they really hate the Labour Party. They really hate the left. So they are trying to cut, but they know if they do this, like all of a sudden, there'll be a massive rage in the country, because in 2016 and in some years after as well, we saw crowds and crowds on the streets claiming rights. And I think they don't want this kind of bad image to this government more than it already has. But I think if I wouldn't say the Labour Party, I'm not even sure if they're going to win the next election, but if someone more moderate, and when I say moderate, it really doesn't matter if it's the left, middle, or the moderate right, but not the outright. If they win the 2022 elections, then I think they will keep investing on it, because when you, as Amartya Sen once wrote about the development and freedoms and so on, he was trying to say that if governments, they invest on overcoming social problems, overcoming poverty, overcoming inequality, then it's more likely that as a consequence, the human rights will be more fulfilled in that country if we overcome these problems. So I think it doesn't matter the party, except the alt-right party, but most of the parties, they have this concern, they have this kind of mentality. So I think they might keep investing, but we had some incidents with indigenous communities lately. There was one in this year, the state of Maranhão. There were miners and people related to the lumber industry. They set fire on indigenous community, and the government was like, should we do something? Should we not? And sadly, this community was left by their own destiny, so saying, because they wanted to have the state protection, but due to this government, they don't have enough state protection. So it's a tough question, but I hope I have answered your question.
No, thank you so much. It was great. I was just like curious to hear about, because there was so many news like, if this president or prime minister stays, the whole Brazilian forest will be wiped out. Something like, it's like always in the social media, much more exaggerated, but yeah, but thank you so much. It was really interesting discussion and presentation, and I would hand over to Shama to conclude the session, and thank you again.
Thank you very much for your questions and comments as well. It was a pleasure being with you all here today.
Thank you, Valéria, and thank you again, all the participants. And our next lecture is on 6th of next month, August. Okay, 6th of August, same time. The topic is, again, it's on Indian courts on climate change. So if you are interested, anyone interested, you can register with us. You can send us an email. We'll send you the link for joining the Zoom session. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you again. And just one more thing, if I may add, you can, if any of you have any other comment, concern, or want to discuss something about our contest here in South America, you can all email me. Shuma, if you want, you can share my mail with them,
Sure,
or I can write down here. So please don't be shy. I'm happy to discuss. and also to discuss about our Inter-American Court on Human Rights, which has really good cases on environmental and indigenous protection. So thank you again, and I wish to see you again once more. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.